Hello and welcome back to FATBOSS TV. Today we're back for more testing on the 7.3 PTR, and today we're looking at Aggramar from Antorus, the Burning Throne.
So this is the penultimate boss in Antorus, and we are fighting a Titan, which is pretty cool stuff. This is a 3-phase fight where you'll be dealing with Aggramar in each phase, with an intermission separating these phases, where you'll need to deal with powerful elementals that are trying to one-shot you. Now, as a quick disclaimer before we get into things, this is footage from the PTR, so things are subject to change, although usually they won't change at all before live servers, but there's always that possibility. Either way, expect a full official FATBOSS guide once this encounter is seen on live servers. With that out of the way, let's go straight into it and talk about phase 1.
Now, the tanks need to constantly cuddle throughout this phase, as each melee hit the boss does will also damage the nearest player, and if nobody is nearby, then the boss will just hit the main tank twice. Melee DPS need to constantly keep away from the tanks, otherwise you're going to get slapped in the face and probably die. Each melee hit will also apply a debuff to the main tank, which increases physical damage taken by 5% for 12 seconds, and this stacks. This just acts as a tank swap, just taunt off each other once your debuff is dropped. For the raid, you want to be spread at least 4 yards because of the Scorching Blaze debuffs. Aggramar will apply this debuff to multiple players at once, and it will deal ticking damage to the player and anyone nearby over 1.5 seconds. This damage becomes very dangerous if multiple people stack with this debuff. Make sure you're spread before these debuffs come in just to give your healers a chance. Occasionally, Aggramar will cast Wake of Flame. He will cause several narrow fire waves to spawn in melee, and moments later, these will fly off in straight lines. Getting hit by these is really bad. It deals a flat amount of damage to you and applies a nasty dot. There is a delay between when the waves spawn and when they begin to move. You want to use this time to identify the direction they're about to move in, so you can quickly move out of the way, and that way they'll become easy to dodge. Now, Aggramar has an energy bar that passively fills up over time. Whenever he reaches 100 energy, he will start his Te Shalak technique. This is a series of 5 attacks that you will always cast in the same order. He starts off by casting Foebreaker. This is a frontal cone shockwave that will do a large amount of physical damage and apply a debuff which increases the damage you take from Foebreaker by 500% for 30 seconds. You want only one tank to take this hit whilst using a large damage reduction. Next, he'll cast Flame Rend. This is another frontal cone, however this damage is shared between all players hit whilst knocking you back. The raid needs to stack behind the boss and have your other tank taunt and face him towards the raid. He'll then cast another Foebreaker. This cannot hit the tank that took the first hit, as otherwise he'll be one-shot. You'll then get another Flame Rend, you just want to do the same thing that you did with the first, and then finally, he'll cast a Searing Tempest. This creates a large zone around Aggramar which will explode at the end of the cast, dealing a bunch of damage and disorienting anyone who is inside of it for 5 seconds. This is a super long cast and you have plenty of time to move from it. After the Searing Tempest cast, the fight goes back to normal. Aggramar's energy will reset and slowly start regenerating again. You'll continue fighting him until he reaches 80% health, at which point he'll travel to the middle of the room and the first intermission will begin.
Once Aggramar reaches the middle of the room, he'll become immune and place a shield around him. Running into this shield will knock you back and deal damage to you. So before the transition starts, try not to stand in the middle of the room, otherwise you're just going to be knocked about. As soon as he goes immune, several adds will appear. 2 large adds on either side of him and several small ember adds around the circumference of the room. The big adds each need to be tanked but cannot be stacked as they have a 15-yard aura which increases the damage done by all adds by 50%. The big adds themselves will only melee hit, but they do have a passive stacking buff that deals ticking damage to the raid. You need to kill these adds before the ticking damage becomes overwhelming. While the tanks are dealing with the big adds, the raid primarily needs to be dealing with the little ones. The little adds will simply just move towards Aggramar. Once they reach him, they'll explode. This deals large raid-wide damage whilst also applying a debuff that increases the damage from further explosions by 50% for 20 seconds, and this effect stacks. A single explosion from these adds won't kill you, but multiple ones definitely will. These adds, however, can be knocked back, stunned, gripped, slowed, rooted. You can even use things like Banish and Paralyze, even Frost Traps. So you want to use all of these effects to keep them away. We assign players to cover certain areas of the room just to make sure every single add had some form of hard CC or slow on them, while DPS begin to kill them off. Meanwhile, it's vital that tanks move the big adds away from any of the little ones to prevent the aura from reaching them. Not only does it increase the adds' damage once they reach Aggramar, but it also causes them to become immune to CC and also speed up, so it's a bad day all around if that happens. Now, on normal mode, when the embers die, they'll simply just despawn. However, on heroic, they'll instead melt into a pool. After 18 seconds, they'll respawn with full health and begin to charge towards Aggramar once again. The only way to permanently remove the adds is to let them touch the boss and explode. For this intermission, we found it best to only let a single add reach Aggramar, while the rest we just killed off into pools. Afterwards, all DPS would swap to the big adds and get them down as soon as possible, and that's when phase 2 begins.
It is from this point onwards that we dealt with the remaining embers, allowing them to move to the boss one by one, letting the raid-wide damage take an increased debuff to drop between them. This is much easier said than done, especially with time against you. From the moment the ads spawned in the intermission, a timer has started. After 3 minutes, all embers will explode regardless if they're near Aggramar or not. So the moment the intermission starts, you have 3 minutes to finish the intermission and let every single ad hit the boss in a staggered fashion during phase 2 before the time runs out and multiple explosions wipe the raid. This becomes especially difficult when you also have boss abilities to deal with on top of it. Any raid-wide damage abilities such as the Flame Rend from his Taishalak sequence or the damage from the Scorching Blaze with an explosion simultaneously is very dangerous. This means you must reach the criteria of 1. The explosion debuff has dropped, and 2. The raid is on full health and no damaging ability is coming in anytime soon, before an ad can be exploded. Meanwhile, all ads must be kept away from the boss and only let through one at a time to hit the boss. We found that Death Grip was the most efficient way of exploding ads on the boss as it can be done instantly. Let's have a look at the rest of the phase. He'll be keeping all of his abilities from phase 1 apart from Wake of Flame, which has now been replaced by Flare. Flare causes 3 large zones to appear underneath random ranged players' feet, one after another. A few seconds later, these zones will explode, dealing a ton of damage to anyone who was within them. We found that just being spread out and moving from these zones as they spawn was pretty much all you could do. Players on the outskirts of flare zones really want to give the players leaving the zones room, as the Scorching Blaze debuff has a nasty habit of overlapping at this point, and you really don't want to stack with the debuff, otherwise you're going to cleave on top of each other. Either way, once you've found the balance of exploding ads whilst dealing with the boss's other abilities, you'll eventually get him down to 40% health and Intermission 2 will begin.
This intermission is the same as the first, except a single Wake of Flame line will occasionally fly out the boss in the middle of the room. These really need to be avoided as their damage in combination with the AoE damage from the big ads is going to kill you pretty quickly. You need to deal with the ads in the exact same way by killing the little ads and then killing the big ads, and then exploding the little ads over the course of phase 3. We didn't manage to get past this point on heroic testing unfortunately, but we did get to see phase 3 during our normal mode raid testing, and there was actually no differences in the difficulties apart from the fact that you don't need to deal the ads from the intermission. Now this phase actually plays out the exact same way as phase 2, however the flare has now been empowered. The flare will act the same way, except now when they explode, they'll also radiate out Wake of Flame lines. As you can see on screen now, this was very difficult to spot on normal mode. This is just because the animation of it was garbage, but it has since been improved, so they'll be a lot easier to spot once you get on live servers. But apart from that, this phase hasn't changed whatsoever, really. Yeah. So, what do we think? What's our feedback?
Yeah, although this boss may seem simple and maybe a little bit dull because the mechanics don't change too much, each of the mechanics actually means something. They are all deadly if you don't deal with them correctly, and they do come in frequently enough to keep you on your toes, which is nice. One thing you definitely could say about this fight though, is that phase 2 and phase 3 are very, very similar. Like the one mechanical change is, oh, and now there's some lines. So if you didn't like phase 2, you're certainly not going to like phase 3.
That's true, yeah.
But that being said, the main meat of this encounter is definitely dealing with the little ads through phase 2 and 3. That's what kind of makes the fight tense.
Yeah, there are so many different ways of doing this encounter with those ads. There are so many different strategies that you could actually employ. I mean, we were playing around the idea of sort of kiting the boss around the room and having the ads slowed behind, and then we just death grip an ad every time that we wanted to explode one. That was too slow on some of our pulls, and they just all exploded. It wouldn't surprise me if we see like multiple ads being exploded all at the same time with just using every single raid cooldown you have.
Yeah.
However, there has been one change that we picked up in the tooltips since PTR, is that instead of the ads just having a large initial burst of damage, it's instead going to be replaced with a dot.
Yeah, so it does like a medium amount of damage in comparison. So it does a lesser initial amount, but there's a dot aspect to the debuff instead. And the debuff only lasts 15 seconds, so you can actually blow up ads slightly more quickly now as well.
Whether or not that actually hits live servers, though, we don't know. But I assume that that's what their plan is, which is going to make phase 2 a lot easier because you're not going to have to worry about ad explosions instantly comboing you with other abilities.
Yeah.
All you need to do is just throw the ad into the boss every 15 seconds. You don't need to worry about the other abilities. But whether or not that's the case, like I say, we don't know.
But that's where we're going to leave it today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, then make sure you leave a like on it. It helps us out a lot. And of course, a big, big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You guys are absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for your continued support. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching.